Hi everyone, it's Jen. Today I want to talk a little bit about starting a project and being able to finish it. So one of the things that has been kind of coming up, a reoccurring thing I've noticed working in the digital lab at work is that there are a lot of people who have an aspiration to work on a project, but they because they haven't gone through the entire process of maybe starting a project from beginning to end, the whole prospect of it is very daunting and they kind of give up before they start. Um, I'm sure everybody knows kind of what that looks like. Even if it's not you yourself, I'm sure everybody at least knows somebody who kind of talks about wanting to do something or having this idea, but then they never actually even really get started. Um, and usually getting started is like the hardest part of working on a project, right? Once you get into the swing of things, generally, it becomes a habit and it's just a kind of matter of like sticking to it. There are some people who will start a project and they will drop it like midway through, but sometimes that's just kind of what is required. Like if you get started on something and you no longer have a passion for it, or you realize that it's not really quite what you expected, like I don't think there's any harm in dumping that project for something else that you feel more inclined to do. Um, but getting started, when people don't even start the process, I think that's where you're not even really giving yourself a chance. So I want to talk a little bit about starting the process, and kind of how you can see that process from beginning to end, at least how I keep myself motivated, so to speak, and how I encourage, or I try to encourage and motivate the people who are around me. So one of the things that in my mind that separates kind of like, I guess, professional creators or established creators from um, aspiring creators is having that experience of completing the process from beginning to end and being able to accurately assess like the amount of work that a project will take and being able to imagine accurately what the process will be like. Because having that experience and having that ability to kind of make these kind of accurate assessments in your head, um, you've pretty much visualized your project from that point. And if you can visualize your project accurately and make a mental map, kind of be able to imagine what it will take to get from beginning to end, you really just have to execute it. So, in some ways, the hardest part, like being able to visualize and have a plan and have a pathway to getting there, um, is already done. And then it's just a matter of going through the physical motions of executing that plan. But coming up with the plan is kind of the hardest part. Not just like a vague plan where you just assume that like what you don't know is going to fall in place, but an actual accurate plan. So like um, being able to go from point A to point B. If you know how to get there, I guess getting in your car and driving there is kind of like it's just going through the motions. You can practically be on autopilot. Um, versus like if you have no idea where your destination is, or you have a vague idea of where your destination is but you have no idea like any of the routes to get there, it becomes suddenly a whole gargantuan task that's very like intimidating and can seem kind of scary, and then you probably don't even want to get in your car. You're probably just like, well, I don't really need to go to that point B because I don't want to risk the idea of getting lost or wasting time or being disappointed or, you know, whatever other catastrophic kind of consequences of not being able to complete your idea. You know, it's better to just kind of think of this far off place as being like a dream that I'm not going to actually concern myself with like figuring out like the roadmap to get there. So here's what my advice would be for getting started is spend some time mapping out what that actually looks like. And you can write notes, you can create outlines, or this can just be a purely imaginary exercise in your mind. If you want to make a game, start breaking down what those tasks would look like. So you can start off broad. You can start off with just being like, well, I need to find a game engine. I'll need to learn some code. I'll have to create some art assets. I'll have to find or create some music assets. And then you start breaking down those things. So I want to make a whatever type of game, maybe it's a 2D platformer. I'm going to need to learn how to code, you know, find a 2D engine, probably look up some tutorials on how to, you know, program like player input of like up, down, right, left. You know, I want to have crouching, I want to have jumping, so I'm going to have to figure out how to program that. And then these tasks just start, and I'm not saying that this is quick or easy. In some ways, formulating a solid mental map is going to be like the hardest part, right? So we start making out plans, and you don't have to necessarily like learn how to code right then and there when you figure out that you need to code. It's just going to be one of those tasks on your list. So when you're planning out like how you're going to approach this project, you know, do enough research to at least like kind of be like, well, I'm going to make this in a 2D engine. I'm going to use Godot. Godot uses GDScript. GDScript is very similar to Python. I'm going to have to learn, probably spend at least, you know, a few hours learning some basic Python. That will probably help me a lot. And if you want to skip all that and just go straight to Godot tutorials, then you can probably factor that in too. You can probably look at that and be like, okay, well, I'm going to watch, you know, a series of YouTube videos on like how to create a platformer in Godot, and then I'm going to, you know, that's going to take probably, you know, a couple hours at least. And then you start breaking down all those tasks, and you say, okay, my short-term goal is going to be, I'm going to make a proof of concept. So whether that proof of concept is just like, you know, one screen where you just kind of move back and forth, up and down, and so you have your character sprite, you have your background art, you have the player controls, and then you can have like a whole, you know, winding adventure that you're planning on having this game take place over the course of like hours and hours and hours, and you're going to work on it for years. But your short-term goal is meant to be a way of being able to accurately assess what your process is going to be like, because a lot of the skills that you use in these long, lengthy projects is going to be something that's going to be hard to start when you don't know what the process is like. But once you become familiar with your process, then it's just going to be a matter of executing it. So if I'm making a comic, let me plan out one important scene or one scene that I'm excited about. That's going to be like a sequence of like 10 pages. And that will give me a good indicator of like what type of work is going to go into making the 200-page book, and whether or not, you know, I need to make revisions in my process, get comfortable in my process, and it'll give me a good idea of how long it takes me to make 10 pages. And so that way I can start planning out like, okay, now I can make myself another goal to make these 200 pages in like X many days, because it took me, X many days to make 10 pages. And maybe it took me like X many days to even become comfortable with making the first page, but after the first like 10 pages, now I'm getting a better idea of how the next 10 pages will look. And so once you can start planning out your process, once you have an idea of what your process looks like, you have an accurate mental map of it, then you can start stretching that out to be your long-term goal. And then sticking to your long-term goal is going to be a matter of discipline, but not the type of discipline that is like punishing you when you fall behind or don't stick to schedule. The type of discipline I'm talking about is the guiding discipline. So I'm talking about a positive way of approaching this where you make it a habit, and even if it is only for 5 minutes a day to think about your project, to make that mental map of like, this is how it's going to go, then that is still way better than nothing. And that is still making your work on your project a habit. So once it becomes a habit, then it is going to be much easier to sustain. And when I talk about making a mental map, the other reason why I think it's important to think about what your strategy is for creating your project like on a daily basis, again, even if it's only for just like jotting down your plan for that day and for the rest of the week and for the rest of the month, your goals. Or maybe it's just thinking about what your plan for the day is and for what your plan for the week is and what your plan for the next month is. We want to keep your project a realistic expectation. So life is inevitably going to hold you back. You're going to have days where you're not going to make your deadlines or your projected goals. And so I like to approach every day with seeing it as an opportunity, as in like, oh yes, I'm looking forward to this. I'm excited, not because I'm gonna worry about the goals I didn't make and like worry about how I'm gonna make up for those goals that I didn't make, and now I'm gonna put a bunch of stress on myself. No, I'm gonna think of it as in, today is a new opportunity to reassess my goals, to set myself a manageable, sustainable, positive schedule that I feel excited to work on. And if I have to revise this schedule again tomorrow, that's fine. I'm going to work with what I have today. And then, if I exceed my goal or I make my goal, that's going to be great. If I don't, because life gets in the way, then that's fine too. Tomorrow will be another day that I can reassess my goals and make myself a new mental map of where I am currently. What can I do right now, and what is sustainable right now, and what is my long-term goal right now that is going to work for me right now. So you have an opportunity every day to make yourself these goals, and I wouldn't dwell on the negative. I wouldn't try to motivate yourself through shame and through criticism of yourself or any of those like negative talking points, because eventually those types of feelings are unsustainable. You're not going to want to think about your project every day if every day you just kind of shame yourself and make yourself feel bad about like what you didn't do. You want to think about your project and yourself in a positive way, and you want to be able to come from it from a perspective of, I can do this, instead of the kinds of things that are like, I can't do that, I didn't do that, because now your project is no longer something that you're imagining finishing, that you're excited to execute. It's something that you are giving up on. Whether you've consciously given up on it already, like you say, I absolutely give up, or you're just playing all the kind of negative voices, the negative kind of attitudes that are going to lead to you giving up. because we all want positive reinforcements. We all want to do things that make us feel positive. So why would you want to stick to a project that you associate with like negative feelings with? That is setting yourself up for failure. So if you really want to do something, you want to make it something that's fun for yourself, that's going to be reaffirming, that's going to bring you joy. And that's why I say focus on the process, focus on where you are right now, and um, don't think about all those negative things, because those are all going to be things that are going to deter you from doing anything. And I personally don't want to look back at my life and have like a bunch of things that I wish I had started, but I had talked myself out. So I hope that you find this to be an encouragement. And I just, it sounds a little like, oh yeah, feel good vibes or whatever, like easier, said than done or whatever. But it really does kind of work. This whole mind over matter thing, like, yes, I can't make myself like be able to fly in the sky, but to be honest, I can't really honestly imagine myself flying in the sky. Like, it just it just flies in the face of everything that I know or believe of the world and physics and all that kind of stuff. But like, I can realistically and convince myself that I can do certain things that I have a experience of being able to do, and I know what my ability is, and I have a realistic expectation of myself. And so those are the kinds of things that I think of going forward. It's not pushing myself to do something beyond my ability. It's merely believing in myself and um, envisioning myself to be able to do these things. And then once I genuinely believe in myself, because I know that I can do something based on prior experience, then it's just a matter of execution. All right, take care and enjoy the process. Bye.